approved the new companies bill, which mandates that companies with the net worth of rupees 500 crores or more, a turnover of rupees 1,000 crore or more, and a net profit of rupees 5 crores or more during any financial year spend 2% of their 3-year average annual profit towards corporate social responsibility. Clause 135. To put it simple, these 3 lines have brought us all over here and bringing in many other places to discuss the emerging landscape. It actually is still a conundrum. It's emerging. And who better to learn it from? Who better to learn it from than the man behind this whole thing? We have with us Dr. Bhasker Chaterjee, CEO, IICA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India. As Secretary in the Department of Public Enterprises, Dr. Chaterjee was leading reform among Indian state-owned enterprises, laying a special emphasis on corporate governance, human resource management, sustainable development, and CSR. He is also a widely acclaimed management practitioner, theorist, and teacher. In 1990, he authored his first book, a path-breaking work entitled Japanese Management, Maruti and the Indian Experience. Most recently, his widely acclaimed book, Leadership India, Leading Changes, Changing Lives, was also released. I welcome you, sir, to please address this gathering.
Mr. John Bede, Dr. K.K. Upadhyay, Mr. Parul Soni, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Frankly, I would have been happier to come in at the end and follow up on what my distinguished brethren on the dais had already said. But since I've been escalated and put up here to face the audience on a bright morning, let me try and run the gauntlet. There's this buzz about CSR and it's happening all over the country. And very many people are very curious to know how it all came about. And now that it has come about, how should we go about it? Need we go about it at all? So very briefly, I'll try and recall some of the thought that's gone behind it. Why has government made this legislation at all? Having made it, what are government's expectations from the corporate sector, from the NGOs? And finally, what is the corporate sector and NGOs' expectation from government? And that, I think, will more or less round up what we need to say, get a perspective on what we need to do. First off, CSR, as you would have heard from the opening speaker, has as many definitions as are people on this planet. And therefore, it's very hard for us to say what is CSR and what is not. It means too many things to too many people. If you look at it from the very narrow perspective of this particular legislation, however, it has a very distinctive definition. And the purpose of drafting that legislation was to ensure that there is no other definition. This is it. So what you need to do under the law should be very, very specific and should be very clear to every person in the audience. It means, very simply put, that you need to actually show in terms of hard cash what you have spent on CSR. That's the first input. You have to reveal project by project exactly how much money you have spent. So if it is not rupee measurable, it is not CSR. That's the first principle. A principle so unique that it's never been developed in any corner of the globe. You read report after report of any company on earth, and you will never see how much they've spent activity-wise, or even completely. The second point, it's not enough to say I spent 5 rupees or $1. What you spend needs to total up to 2% of your net profit, which incidentally now the rules put up on the website indicate profit before tax, PBT, not PAT. These profits before tax are also defined as companies which have 5 crores or more as an average of the last 3 years. So if you've gone zoom up and zoom down and so on and so forth, and the average is less than 5 crores, you can go to sleep easy. But if it's a little bit over 5 crores, well, you're in the ambit. That's the first part. What will constitute CSR activities? They are defined in Schedule 7. Every one of you should have Schedule 7 in front of you. If you don't know what CSR is. Schedule 7, which is also up on the website, by the way, defines 9 activities only. Therefore, anything outside of those 9 activities is not CSR for the purposes of this bill. However, at the very end of those 9 definitions, it says any other aspect which may be prescribed. Hence, if government in its enormous wisdom prescribes any other thing, then we guys can take it. If they don't prescribe, too bad. So now I've said to you, you are only attracted if your PBT crosses that 3-year margin. If it is rupee measurable, it is. And it is one of those 9 activities. That's broadly the definition of CSR. You might find that constrictive, you might find that, gives you practically no elbow room, but it also gives you very specific clarity on what you can and what you can't. How many companies would be attracted by this definition? Approximately 8,000. How many companies are registered in this country? Anyone, any idea? Well, technically there are more than 10 lakh companies. Actually about 11 million. But of them, approximately 800,000 are registered. Of those 800,000 or 8 lakhs, the number of companies who would actually be attracted by this legislation is 1%. 8,000. Therefore, the number of Indian companies that are actually going to come aboard on this legislation, irrespective of the huge buzz that surrounds it, is just 1%. Second off, how much money are we going to release through the CSR system? And the figures have been differing so wildly. Everyone has a wild guess at approximately how much. Nobody really knows. We ourselves are crunching the numbers. But it will be somewhere between 10 and 12,000 crores in the very first year. Probably jack that up to about 15, 17,000 crores from the following year. Is this a big amount? Is 12 or 15,000 crores big? Depends. If you ask the beggar on the roadside, he said $10 is big. What's big? What's small? Let's compare and you will know. Because if it's big or small, it's vis-a-vis something. What's the budget of one department of the government of India? The Rural Development Department, which mostly does what we say about CSR. Just one department of the government of India has an annual budget of 70,000 crores. The entire corporate sector CSR, about which so much is being said, is about 12,000 crores. Now you know what's big, what's small. Importantly, however, this so-called small amount is capable of being leveraged several times over. Because when you put monies into projects, chances are lots of other money would also flow into them. Therefore, the expectation is that this is not a fixed number. We will leverage this amount to ensure that far more monies flow into the CSR stream. So I've told you approximately how many companies, I've told you approximately how much money. Now when you go out and speak to the larger world, what often do you hear? I say, we've been doing CSR for donkey's years. What's new? Many companies, and the names are so common that I need hardly reiterate them here. Whenever I go to a conference like this, but you know, we've been doing it for years, my granddad did it, my great-grandmom did it, and we've been doing it, it's in our genes, it's in our blood, it's in our DNA, blah, 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 blah. The fact is, that of these so-called 8,000 companies, less than 500 companies have actually been doing any kind of CSR at all. If you eliminate the so-called Tatas and Birlas and Mahindras and whatever else who apparently had CSR in their genes, almost 90% of companies have done not a zilch. Those who have, here's the opportunity to tell the world what you have been doing. The argument often touted around is, we've been doing it, so why is government mandating it? Government is only building an enabling atmosphere. If you've been doing it, come clean and say what you've been doing. Say it out loud. Give your company the chance to go out there and say to the world, guys, this is what we've been doing. And tell it to us in a transparent manner. Don't give us those advertorial slides that, sort of show off what you've been doing. Show it to us in a clean, clear format that's available across the nation for all countries, for all companies. That's what the Act does. It prescribes a clean, clear format. In the rules that are up on the net, you will see that the return you fill as MD of your company is exactly the same that he fills as the MD of another company. Therefore, the playing field is level. You will reveal exactly as much as he or she in another company will reveal. Fourth off, CSR is not charity. It's not philanthropy. It's not giving. It's not doing anyone a favor. Most important definition of CSR is, it's none of these things. And that the Act says clearly. Hence, writing a check, giving a gift, providing freebies, all of this is not in the ambit of CSR, which doesn't mean that you can't or you should not. Please give away all the clothes you have. It's your choice. Give away all the money you have. Your choice. But it just won't be CSR. CSR is about actually doing projects, doing programs. And in the project mode, you will need to indicate start time, end time. How much money was allocated to that program? How was it monitored? How was it evaluated? What social impact did it create? And every one of those programs or projects need to be listed in the return that you file to government. And how much money you propose to spend on it is also listed. Broadly, these are the tenets of what the bill provides, the Act now provides. if you are now an MD and you are going to put a CSR system in operation, what do you need to do practically? What's the checkbox? What are the 3 or 4 things you need to do as of yesterday? The CSR clock, the CSR meter starts ticking from the 1st of April 2014. From now till then, you have preparatory time. The year 2014-15 is the year on which you will need to report. And naturally, you will report when the year is ended. So the first returns will come into the public domain from the 1st of April 2015. And that's when India and the world at large will first see what corporate India is actually doing. Let's say, theoretically, and this is possible, you decide all of this is a lot of balderdash. It's a load of crap. Government can be flushed down the drain. We don't want to do a thing about CSR. These guys have gone off their rockers. And you are free to hold that view. You might disagree. It's a democratic country. And so you might say in your return, we believe that CSR is only for donkeys or cows or whatever. We will never ever do any CSR. Remember that what you say will of course be out there in the public domain. So it's there for the activists to see, the media to see, your shareholders to see, your stakeholders to see, but it's a free country. So you can say whatever you want to. Let's say that you are even more thick-skinned, and that's wonderful. You might say, I don't want to do this rubbish, and I don't even want to report to government. What if I do not do and I do not report? A question often asked by the media. There's all this hoopla about this legislation. But you could be a conscientious objector. And you could say, flush this down the drain, man. We don't need it. What happens then? Is there a penalty? Is there a consequence? The consequence is indeed painful, very painful. Because under 134(8), it prescribes a maximum penalty of 25 lakhs and not or. Therefore, the company and its executives would fall under the long arm of the law if they were not to do and also not to report. However, if they did nothing and reported that we did nothing, they're safe, at least for now. This is broadly the total scope of what you're supposed to do. Secondly, in your checkbox, you need to quickly constitute that CSR committee. Not an easy thing to do, because if I were on the board, and it's lovely that I'm not, I wouldn't want to volunteer for the CSR committee. And why not? First off, that CSR committee would need to be on the website, not only yours, but the government Ministry of Corporate website, by name, not by designation. Therefore, you are identified as a human being with a particular DI number out there in the open space. If you are a member of that committee, and let's say as the MD of this company, you've constituted your CSR committee, what's this committee supposed to do? Number one, it has to frame a CSR policy. That's easy. I can write a policy off the back of my head, even in my sleep. A good corporate executive writes policies, maybe with the wrong hand. I won't say left or right. He can write it off the back of his head or with the wrong hand any time of day. Corporates love policy as much as government does. They're easy to frame, easy to push out. lovely air-conditioned rooms in which to write them, good secretaries to which you can dictate, and so on and so forth. They're fun. And they also test your English skills, your communication skills. Your corporate communication department has a ball. It's lovely to get lots of policy stuff coming out of the boardroom. And because policies are so easy to write and so easy to roll out, this one is completely different. Why is it so different? This is the only policy of the company that will need to mandatorily list every single project or program that you propose to do under CSR. So what you write in those 4 or 5 pages of well-crafted sentences is fine. But the annexure which details every single activity with the amount of money that you will spend on it is the vital part of the policy. If that list is not there, the policy will not be accepted by our website. You can't push it in. Second off, you will need to have the policy passed by a full meeting of the board. If the policy is not passed by the board, it will not register as a policy. The CSR committee's troubles have just begun. Not because of the arrival of our chief guest here, but because now they are constituted. And because they are constituted, what the hell do they now do? They've crafted this policy, they've put out a wish list of things their company would love to do in CSR, and it all adds up to that lovely 2%, which brings us just above the bar. And we're all happy, let's do a quick boardroom lunch followed by nice drinks and dinner, and let's all go home. Sadly, that won't work either. This CSR committee will now need to monitor every one of those activities which itself, in its own wisdom, has listed as part of the policy. They say, if you want to do something to yourself, just tie a noose around your own neck. Here's the opportunity. Write all the things in that policy which you know can never be done, which your company will never do, and with which you're not even interested. If you write that kind of stuff, you will soon be in trouble, and I'll tell you how. Let's say you're a member of that CSR committee. You have a budget of, let's say, 40 crores. And let's say that that translates into roughly 100 activities. Just the ballpark figure. This 3-member committee will need to monitor all those 100 activities. How will it do that? It can only do so if there is a very strong, very robust monitoring mechanism. If that's not there, no way that this 3-member committee can ever track what's happening where. That robust monitoring mechanism has to be devised in the company. And who will do that? The committee members need to put pressure on the managing director and the CEO to ensure that that monitoring mechanism is in place. So it could be an IT mechanism, it could be visits to the workplace, whatever else you want to do. But end of the day, you need to monitor. Therefore, for each activity, there will also be milestones. Quarterly reviews, monthly reviews, half-yearly reviews, whatever you want to do. But you need to have very clear feedback on what's actually happening on the ground. Is that bad enough, or is there worse to follow? The fact is, the bad news doesn't end here. The Act also says, and this really is the clincher, that these 3 august personages in the committee will list, will monitor, but will also ensure that every one of those activities actually happened. If one of them doesn't happen, every one of these members is individually liable, not collectively. Therefore, there is practically no escape route. What you said in your policy, you must monitor and you must ensure that actually happens on the ground. A hard act, that's what it is. Having said all this though, and maybe presenting a rather forbidding picture, the fact is it's not so hard. Why is it not so hard? Because you have this lovely NGO community. Remember, corporates are not expected to do any CSR work on their own. Hopefully they won't do it. Mostly where corporates have soiled their own fingers, they've done it horribly. CSR activities are best left to those professional implementing agencies, that's what I prefer to call NGOs, who actually do this for a living. If you do it for a living, you are a professional. And because community development, working with communities, finding out what their real needs are, addressing them, working with them, really happens much easier and much better to NGOs rather than to the suited, booted executives up on the 26th floor of fancy buildings in the corporate boardroom. So usually we would expect that the classic model would be for the company to invest its resources, outsource CSR to implementing agencies, monitor them, and ensure that they deliver the goods. Now, this symbiotic relationship between the corporate and the NGO is the very obvious outcome of the whole legislation. If this doesn't happen, CSR will not happen. If NGOs do not step up to the plate, there will not be CSR. So the onus of how much we need on CSR, how much we need to get and activize them is important. So far, most NGOs have been dependent on government. Hopefully that dependency will conclude. And there will be much more of that synergic relationship between NGOs and corporate houses. In my closing statement, I'll just finish up by saying that this whole CSR is conceived as a partnership between government, the corporate world, and the NGO world. If this triumvirate doesn't actually work together, India will fail. If India fails, the first really novel experiment on CSR will also fail. The eyes of the world are on India and what we call its leap of faith. We are actually treading uncharted waters. Countries before us, Malaysia, for example, France, for example, who've tried some form of loose legislation, have really not been able to sustain it. There are the naysayers, there are the doom welcomers, there are many, many critics, and there are, of course, a humongous number of pessimists. When the bill went through the Lok Sabha, everybody said, oh yeah, that's taken them many, many years. It'll never happen in the Rajya Sabha. When it went through the upper house, they said, oh my God, in this whole session, just one bill went through the first week. Yes, it happened. And then there was this huge buzz which said, of course, it's gone through the Lok Sabha, it's gone through the Rajya Sabha, but the wise man sitting in Rashtrapati Bhavan, he will never sign it. And of course, he still did. So what I'm trying to say is, here is an opportunity. Here is an enabler. Here is a possibility when three enormous groups can come together and make a CSR for India an Indian model of CSR, addressing our development needs, looking at what we can do for our communities, those who are really in need of efforts in health, which we're here for, in education, in the environment, for all of those things in which India is far behind the world indices. An opportunity to help those in need. Cut the legislation. Our own consciousness should tell us we corporates can make a difference. We can spend money 100 times better than government. We can bring last mile connectivities which government in 60 years hasn't been able to do. We can make our money work better. We can do to the community in an electrifying manner which others have not done. Tread that path which will give us a truly Indian model. Thank you.